Tackling your business's finance to-dos can be daunting enough without being slowed down by QuickBooks. More like slow books. NetSuite by Oracle is the #1 financial system, no matter how big your business grows. With visibility and control of your financials, inventory, HR, e-commerce, and more, NetSuite is everything you need to grow, all in one place. Special financing is back. NetSuite is offering a one-of-a-kind financing program only for those ready to switch today. Head to netsuite.com/C-Suite right now. That's netsuite.com/C-Suite.
Hey everybody, it's Mark Pattison. I'm back again with another great episode of Finding Your Summit, all about people overcoming adversity and finding their way. And before we get into today's great episode of adventure, I want to direct everybody to my website, www.markpattisonnfl.com. Of course, I've got over 200 podcasts of other inspirational people doing amazing things. Number one. Number two is I continue to raise money for Higher Ground and Millions Everest. And we've done a great job so far with that, trying to help others in a way that I've felt paying it forward is the right thing to do in life when you're in that position to do so, in addition to helping my daughter, who does have epilepsy. And then the last thing is my movie continues to run on YouTube, the NFL, who covered my epic journey up Mount Everest and back down. And it's really a life story. So proud to have that. But you can find the link to that on YouTube, again, through my website, www.markpattisonnfl.com. And appreciate all the follow, appreciate the listen. And on that note, let's get into today's guest. So I have been Facebook friends with this guy, Frank Fumich, for months and months and months. I'm not sure exactly how many months when you add it all up, but at the end of the day, we had this goal, this common interest that has, I think, driven that friendship. Is basically we're both wacko and we love to do extreme things that really push our limits and push our boundaries and push our bodies. And finally I said, I need to get this guy on the pod and we need to talk about, living a epic life and a life driven by adventure and challenging yourself so that you can turn around and help the next guy in line. So welcome to the pod, Frank Fumich. There you go.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Hey, how you doing? You're
good,
all the
buddy,
way out, you're all the way out in Arlington, Virginia, and I know that you do a lot of work in the airline catering business. So you've got 3 or 4 different airports that you service that's treated you very well over time. But living on the East Coast, and you seem to be a guy that loves to be challenged by mountains. And I don't know if you've looked out the window, but it's pretty flat in that part of the country.
No doubt. That's why someone invented inclined stair or treadmills and stairmasters for us flatlanders.
Yeah. No, I get that. And that's a big reason. Honestly, I moved to Sun Valley, Idaho now 4 years ago, and we live at 6,000 feet. And my stairmaster is right on my window, about 200 yards from my front door. So it really helps when you can. Yeah, no, it's really cool when you can do the real McCoy. And you've always got certainly an open invitation to come here to Sun Valley and hang. Yep. And so you and I can challenge each other up the mountain. But for the audience, I want to set this up. So Frank is a guy that has a drive that goes beyond maybe even what I do. And your challenge to push yourself on all these different extreme races, we're going to get into it, on all these different marathons. We're going to get into it on all these different triathlons and polar challenges and things like that. You go to the next level. And, as I was thinking about this and reading about all your accomplishments, what kept coming back to me is like, where did this drive start for you?
Oh, man, Mark, that's a good question. I think I don't know exactly where it started. I mean, I think it was always inside of me. My folks, who are both passed away, certainly never pushed me hard in anything. I mean, I had a very average upbringing. I was always a good athlete or coordinator, but I was size-wise, I was never good enough or talented enough to take it to any kind of level. But I always liked physical fitness. But I literally didn't start running until I was 30 years old. But I just always had a tendency to do everything, to the level 10, no matter what I did, whether it was working or working out or races. When I finally discovered them, I've just always pushed it. and was just never satisfied with, just the average. I always wanted to see what I was made of and push it, really.
Yeah, I mean that's a commonality you find with a lot of extreme athletes, is just they want to go find, that whole next level to see what they're really made of. And just like when I came off recently, I came off Mount Everest, and you recently came off Denali, and you actually got frostbite in your fingers. Unfortunately, I didn't have that happen to me. But when you take on a Denali, which I've done now twice, and you've taken on an Everest, it's a mother, right? And you don't even know what you're exactly in for as you're training. And I was wondering, kind of out loud, is that actually a good thing, right? You don't really understand the pain that you're going to go in. I don't know if your mind blocks that out because you're not there and you're in the comforts of your home and you run out your door and you're training and this and that, but you're not being pushed like the way that you can be pushed in some of these really extreme conditions.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt. I think a lot of times, ignorance is bliss. I mean, I did. Well, it was my second attempt on Denali. So Denali, for example, I did know what I was getting into. Of course, I'd never been, all I got to was the fixed rope section. So I wasn't in that upper realm, and I did not know what that was like until this time. But yeah, a lot of times, you train as hard as you can, but yeah, I'm training on the East Coast. I literally spend half my time on a Stairmaster and a treadmill and pumping a pack around my neighborhood at like 200 feet of altitude. So the cold, and I'm not a cold weather camper. I honestly hate it.
Yeah.
I think it's crazy. Like, how do you spend 3 weeks on Denali if you hate cold weather? Well, that's the goal you set. You want to stand on top of the mountain. And so, physically I trained as hard as I could, but I was not even in cold weather. So, you find yourself in that situation. It's really mental discipline that, how many times you're really just sitting around in a tent. I mean, you're climbing for 4, 5, 6 hours a day. And then the rest of the time you're just staring at the tent. I didn't bring a book. I had no podcasts, no music, nothing. So I was just, staring at the tent like, man, this, what the hell was I thinking? But, like you, I had a goal and I was not going to leave until, we had our shot at the top.
That's one of the things I think a lot of people don't understand is the amount of downtime it takes to climb these mountains. Because you think about climbing and you think about climbing because you're actually moving. And when you're thinking about climbing, there's really the amount of time that you're sitting or laying on your back, right?
Right.
And so I think part of that mental fortitude that you talked about has to do with just being able to like weather it. We were stuck in a tent for 3 days at Camp 3, 23,500 feet on a 45-degree slope. Not fun. Yeah, that's really rough. And the mental fortitude of not letting the moment overtake you, right? To keep you going. I want to get into some of these races because I think there's one thing to say, hey, I'm going to go out and I'm going to try to clock up maybe a sub 40 10K, right? And there's a whole nother level when you're really starting to search and look out there for races like the Ram, which is a race across America. And it's in that case, it's 12 days and it's continuous and you're probably on a team of other dudes and you just take your turn and rotate and you jump on the bike and off you go. I'm not sure.
I did solo.
Okay, so even worse.
There's nobody to trade off. It was just me and me and me and me. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So even worse. So even more illustrated my point. But so how do you start falling into these races? Like, how would you even know about this race or the 6633? I mean, there's all these names I have listed here on this piece of paper. But like, where do you go find these races? Like, how do you come up with this? Because sometimes you have to be inspired by either somebody else, because your buddy's doing it, or there's a circumstance that launches you into this, like my situation, or you're just, I don't know, maybe you did a Google search or something.
Right. Well, initially, when I ran my first marathon, it was funny because I literally didn't even know an ultra marathon existed. I thought the longest thing you could run was a marathon. So I ran that and I was like, wow, that's the hardest thing on the planet. And then I, learned about the Ironman, I see it on TV. And then, once you run a race, I remember I did learn about a 50 miler. I signed up for a 50 miler here in Virginia, my first ultra. And at the race, people were doing 100 miles. And I was just, when I was done, I couldn't imagine these people were going to run another 12, 14 hours on top of what I did. And I was just blown away. And so, then you start making friends. I have my regular friends and my and crazy endurance friends. and you get in these circles and you learn of different races. And if you want to keep pushing the limit, you got to pick crazier and longer and colder or hotter races. And so that's sort of how I found out about it. I mean, I did a number of stuff like that. And then, I sort of got into the charity thing, and a lot of people have a golf tournament to raise money for charity. And it seems like a pretty good idea, but mine was always, inspiring people to give their money by watching me sort of put myself through torture. So the Ram, I actually found my charity cause, and then I literally went online searching for like the hardest thing I could find to do to raise money for a person. And that's how I actually discovered Ram. It was looking for like the hardest thing I could find.
So let's let's follow that thought with the charity, that you choose. I mean, it's a great way to phrase it. Like, raise money so other people can be inspired by all the torture that you put yourself through, right? Which is your words. And so in terms of like identifying what kind of charity, what is near and dear to you?
Mostly kids with cancer. My nephew was early 20s, and he got cancer maybe 5 or so years ago. So I am drawn to that, but really anything, I don't necessarily go out I don't go out looking for it. I have all kinds of people that'll send me a story, and it just sort of has to hit my heart. Right. I first started, it was the Boston Marathon bombing, and I had a bunch of friends running, and, my first thought was, oh my God, I hope they're okay. And then when I realized they were fine, I got super angry about the whole thing and what happened and the terrorists. And so I ran money to raise money for the victims, and that's what really started it. And then someone reached out to me and pointed out a young man who is from Northern Virginia who was jumped and beaten up at West Virginia University, where I went to college. And he was left in a vegetative state, and his dad quit his job, was caring for him 24/7. And so that motivated me for Ram. And, I raised like $100,000 biking across the country for his care. And there's one, and actually I didn't even finish that race. I DNF'd in West Virginia about 500 miles short, but, doing it for a right reason, not, it is a selfish pursuit, but when you can get so many people motivated, inspired to help someone else, it's such a special feeling. And that's really has been sort of my drive for the last, 5, 6, 7, 8 years.
Well, I always like to call it passion with purpose. And that's what I've really have found through this journey I've been on, of being able to give back. And just, if you can help somebody, you're going to go anyhow. But, along the way, if you can touch some people and you can bring some money that's going to bring somebody else some joy and happiness, I mean, that at the end of the day is really what life is about. We're going to go through these things. So it's going to be a little bit of a hopscotch game, but you have done 6 of the 7 summits. Right. Yeah. I've been very fortunate now to do 7 of the 7. I actually did 9, or really, well, not 9 peaks, but I was on 2 of the 7 twice. So I've been able to enjoy that. What got you going on that side? Because it seems like, as I look back, there was a lot of, you've done over 110 marathons. And so, there was a lot of history behind you, certainly going for endurance races, but more in the flat ground, not necessarily going vertical. And so, where did the bug and this thing about trying to take on the 7 summits, where did that jump on top of you?
Oh, well, I think I read Into Thin Air. Like, how many years ago was that? Like 25 plus years ago?
Yeah.
And then I read the 7 Summits book by Dick Bass. I mean, this was before I ever climbed a mountain.
Yeah.
So, but it was always sort of in the back of my mind, but I never dreamed that I would get into real adventure stuff like that. But then I climbed Rainier with some college buddies, and I summited that, and I was like, wow, that was tough. And then somehow I just decided to climb Kilimanjaro. I had no intention of doing the 7 summits. I just wanted an adventure, in a faraway place.
Yeah.
And so I did that, and that was an amazing experience. But still, I don't know when I made the conscious decision to try all 7. That's one of the things that's been a gradual progression. A lot of the other races, I just find the hardest race of a discipline and just do it. My first triathlon was an Ironman. My first race of any kind was a marathon. So, but the mountains have been gradual because it's dangerous. And I certainly wouldn't just sign up for Mount Everest or Denali as my first and second. So I just ticked those off. And I think maybe after Aconcagua, I was like, wow, that's like 4 done. I think I could do this, but it's been very slow. It's one of the things I haven't been totally obsessed with. I've taken my time, with a family, as with a family of business, kids, dogs, I have to plan carefully, and I can't just, the time has to be right. So yeah, I don't even remember where I made the conscious decision for the 7 summits. It just sort of happened.
Yeah, well, getting all 7 done logistically is not easy. Like you said,
Right.
it takes a lot of time. When you're on Mount Everest, as I found, you're talking 2 months of suffering. So it's not, like all these other ones are 3 weeks max, and then you're back home, and that's that, and that's just a whole different level. Like I said earlier, it is interesting that you were inspired in part by Dick Bass. I was very fortunate years ago to be invited to a Steve Young charity event down at Snowbird, and Dick Bass actually owned that mountain and owned the main lodge there. And so there was an event that those two had partnered up on, and he came up and spoke to a small group of us, ex NFL players. And that's really where a lot of this whole 7 Summit thing, in addition to the 1996, I was more fascinated about that book, like we all were. And it was even more fascinating once we got to high camp on Everest 26.5, and I realized that that's where all that stuff went down. Just kind of like right out of camp there, and just recognizing what those guys must have been going through.
Right.
It just, terrifying, but you just never know where that little spark of inspiration is going to come from, and just opening your mind and opening your ideas to these different things around the world. And that's in part one of the reasons why I want to have you on this podcast, is because, I think you're doing a lot of things out there. I want to go through some of these other ones, but, just expanding what all these crazy races, because so often we get kind of like stuck in our own zone. You're on the East Coast in Virginia. I'm in the middle of Idaho. I'm born and raised from Seattle, so I've done Rainier a couple times, type of thing. So I understand that. But you have another example like Leadville 100. I mean, I never even knew what Leadville 100 was until I went and I saw a movie on it about 6-7 years ago. I was in Santa Monica, and it was I think a lot about Lance Armstrong's. I think he might have won it on a flat tire. And this is when they wrote it, but they also have a running race.
Right.
And essentially, for all those people that don't know, then I'd like you to get into a little more detail about it. But essentially, it's 100 miles out and back. But the town of Leadville, I think, sits at 10,000 feet.
Yeah, I think it's the highest incorporated town in the country, Leadville.
Yeah. And what was that like?
Well, it was hard. Actually, that was the first race I ever DNF'd. I had to try it twice. I'm not that talented. I mean, that's one of the things we don't have in common. I mean, you're a professional football player, and while clearly you had to work your tail off for years and years and years to get there, you also obviously have the genetics and the body of a great athlete. Where I'm just an average guy, and I'm not particularly fast. I mean, admittedly, I'm tough, and I have a high threshold for pain. But so yeah, the first time I tried it, I didn't make it. Went back a couple years later and made it. Yeah, and it averages over 10,000 feet. And when you're flying from Arlington, Virginia, and you land in Leadville, 6 hours later, and then the next day is the race. It's not exactly what they call acclimatizing. So I definitely had my issues, but I wanted to run like some of the hardest. I mean, nowadays it's different. When I first started, there was like a handful of the hardest hundreds, and I did most of them. I did Western States, I did Badwater, I did Leadville, I did UTMB in the Alps. But now, now there's stuff like the Barkley Marathon, which is just totally insane, and 200-mile races. Things keep getting crazier, and I'm not getting any younger. So I think I hit the pinnacle of my 100-mile stuff. But I wanted to experience what it's like to hallucinate. What is it like to be up for 24, 36 hours and basically not sit down, and just see what that felt like and see if I could do it. Really, I mean, it's not enjoyable running in the middle of the night at 10,000 feet, in sleet and hail, but that feeling you get, the accomplishment of what's over, to learn about a race, to make the decision in your mind that you're going to try it, then to spend how many months training for it, and then to show up and accomplish it. And it's really looking back on that I get such satisfaction and the feeling of accomplishment to know that, I stuck it out and I finished.
Yeah, no, I think that's really a life lesson that I want everybody to hear, and that is that I look back on all these mountains I've done, and I've done literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of peaks because I've lived in the Northwest and I now live in the middle of Idaho, right? And on each one of these peaks, it has never been literally about, I don't look back on it like I would in my football days necessarily, where I'm catching the last second touchdown against Michigan, which happened. And, last second touchdown against Oklahoma, it happened. Those were thrilling moments. It's more about all the work. It's more about the journey of the training, the hard work, the ups and the downs. You don't feel like getting out of bed today, but you do, all that kind of stuff. And it's just like, there's so much parallel to me with that and life, and that with, your work, right? The work-life balance, right? So I don't know. It's just something that's always, I've really wanted, like, it's not about the shiny object. It's about what it took to get to that point. Right.
Exactly. My thing is just like, just grunting, being a grunt, working hard. And it's the same philosophy with business. Nothing ever came easy. I always had to work for everything and, just climb tons of hurdles. And I take so much more pride in the amount of work. I mean, tons of people are stronger than me. Tons of people are faster than me, more talented than me. But I don't know anybody that can outwork me. I mean, I can outwork anybody and to reach my goal. And that's what I'm most proud of, I think.
Yeah, I said something similar to some publications earlier, as I was going up Everest. I said, there's nobody that was more prepared to go up Mount Everest than me. I'm not saying that there's not somebody as equal, but there's nobody that's more. And I mean, I know that for an absolute fact. I put in 150,000 vertical feet in 3 months.
Right. That's unbelievable.
It's insane.
Yeah.
So
you definitely earned it, man.
Yeah, but I had to. Those are the things I had to. When things weren't going so good, that's what I had to tap into in terms of those.
Right,
chips.
And I bet you look back. I mean, I listened to your podcast and we've communicated, and I know what you went through. I mean, there was a real fine line there. Imagine if you'd have taken a week off. I mean, every single day that you did get up and train was still just enough for you to get up and get down alive. So I mean, thank God. Yeah,
I mean, there's a real possibility that we're not having this podcast right now. I mean, it's as real as I've ever faced in my life. I want to talk about if I say this right, the UTMB, and I want to understand more about that. But basically, you're in France, and you're dipping into Switzerland, Italy, and back into France. So you're going to 3 or 4 countries. Well, what is that race?
It's just it's a 100-mile ultra marathon. I think really officially it's probably not officially, but unofficially it's probably like 105 miles. Yeah, you start in Chamonix and you go through Switzerland, Italy, but they start you. The unique thing about that race, at least I thought, is that it starts at like 5 p.m. So you're obviously not sleeping until 3 p.m. You're waking up in the morning. You're up during that day, and then you start to run. So that race, I was basically up 2 nights. So I was awake for like 60 some hours straight, and it's got about 30,000 feet of up and down. So you can relate to that just from climbing. I mean, imagine how many feet we climb in a day on Everest or Denali. It was like 3,000 feet is about what we accomplish in a day. So this was basically running 30,000 feet, in a couple days, up and down. And, you're just totally hallucinating. I mean, literally seeing things, not where some people say they believe them. I mean, when I hallucinate, when I've been up for 2 days, I know what I'm seeing is not real. It's more fun than anything else. It's just interesting to like what your mind does to try to get yourself through something. And I experienced tons of it. My buddy Alex Nemeth and I ran that together. And it was weird because your minds play off each other. Like we thought we were hearing the same things that didn't exist, and we were seeing things that didn't exist. But that was probably my toughest 100-miler with that kind of elevation. It's just nothing but climb, and descent, climb and descent. it was a tough one.
I can't imagine though. I mean, I realize you're leaving at 5 p.m. and maybe it's getting dark at 9 or 10 at night, but the insane scenery that you must have been running through,
Oh.
You're in the Alps and Chamonix in France. And I mean, it must have just been, over the moon.
It was spectacular. I wish I could say I enjoyed it, like a tourist would. But when you're in that kind of physical misery, I find it hard. Now during some of the mountain climbs, because we're not just pushing it so redlining it constantly. And there, I'm able to look around and think to myself, like, I mean, how many people get to see what we've seen on these mountains? I mean, the minuscule percentage of people that have seen this, and it's just like so vast and incredible. And I do appreciate it there, but a race like that, unfortunately, I was just looking at my feet, trudging for hours and hours most of the time.
I want to go back to Denali. You were on that mountain a couple months ago, and I know you struggled just a little bit. You came back with some frostbite on your fingers. How did that all go down?
I mean, I took really good care of myself. It really happened. The exposure was on the summit. Yeah, I've raised money for a number of kids, as we talked about. And unfortunately, a number of them have passed away from cancer. And Ryan Divney, who was beat up, he finally passed away years later after that. So for the ones that have passed away, I'd like to take their pictures to the summit, and I took my heavy gloves off. I had my liners on. And it was only for a few minutes and I thought I was going to be okay. But, I got frostbite just taking them off. The wind was blowing on the summit like 30 miles an hour. And it was a little nastier than I thought. I mean, I don't know if you ever saw my summit picture. It's like a total whiteout behind me. We couldn't see any scenery, which was kind of a bummer. Looking back, it's, I get a little pride knowing that I summited Denali on like a terrible day, which is kind of rare. But it was just by taking off my outer gloves. I had my liners on. But it didn't get bad till I got home because I was in my house, like, I forget, it was something crazy, like 2 days, less than 40 hours after being on the summit. We met up in 15, down in 1, flew to Talkeetna. And I didn't even spend the night. I got to Anchorage and flew home on the red eye that night. So it wasn't until like days were going by and I'm like, wow, these fingers aren't looking good. And they just kept getting worse and worse, as it progressed. But fortunately, it's like 90% healed. I'm not going to lose any tissue. The fingernails are still a little funky, but they'll probably be sensitive to cold going forward a little bit. I'll have to be careful. Mm-hmm. But that's how it happened, man. Just taking my gloves off on the summit for 3 minutes is all it took.
Yeah. And, the one thing about Denali is you get that Arctic blast. The first year in 2017, I was up there with minus 80 degree, temperatures, and just have to have such personal care, self-management. And for those who aren't careful about that, you can, find yourself in a really tough situation pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're doing all this stuff. You've run in 1,000 races. It seems like you've got 6 of the 7 down. You've been, to Europe and these other really cool places, the North Pole. You've done an Arctic sled, I think, en route ski to the last degree. As you like think about life going forward for you, and I'm sure it's a little bit of a drug. Like, what do you see? What's next? I keep getting that question now that I've got my 7 done. But what is next for you?
Yeah, seriously. How many emails have I gotten? What's next? Well, right now I've got 13 more states to knock off the marathon. So it's it's not like a crazy goal, but it keeps me busy and it keeps me in shape. I have to have something on the calendar to get me excited and keep me motivated. Otherwise, I don't know. I kind of go crazy. So just marathons. I think I mentioned to you, I am planning on the South Pole ski in about 14 months. That's my next big one. And I'll probably do Carson's Pyramid just to sort of kill time for Everest, in 3 or 4 years. I mean, I've got, I have a couple crazy ideas of things I might consider, but I better tell my wife before I blast it on the internet. But I got a couple, but I got to be honest. I was just messaging or commenting with a friend on Facebook that golf is starting to look a little more appealing to me as I get older. I mean, I'm not saying I'm going to give this stuff up, but I am feeling a little, the fire is flickering a tad. I don't know. I won't be doing this when I'm 80. I mean, climbing mountains, I'll probably be running forever, but I can see a point where I'll be slowing down. But, I got to concentrate on my business too. I got a lot of opportunities coming up in the next few years. So, I can't go to Everest for 60 days anytime soon. And we'll see. But I plan to keep busy for sure.
Well, I think that's what keeps the fire going in all of us is when you do have those goals that are out there and you're just not living to live, but you're living to thrive. And that's one of the things that you've done a great job of doing. There's this one quote I saw on your website, pushing yourself to new levels without ever giving up. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I learned over my time in life, in business, and in this, sport that we do, which is just, adventure racing or adventure climbing, whatever you want to call it. And that is when you're saying never give up, there is a time that you do have to give up just to save your life. But that doesn't mean that you've just you're halfway through and you just give up just because you give up and you've done everything. Right. But sometimes Mother Nature or external forces. I mean, what could any of us do? I planned to go to Mount Everest in 2020. I was supposed to leave in March. If we go back to March, I had packed my bags. I drove to California. I was all set to go. I had my plane ticket, and then the world shuts down. So,
right.
Did I give up? No, I didn't give up, but I had to reset my mindset and reset my goal on how I was going to do that. And it sounds like on some of these things where you didn't finish, like Leadville, you did come back, the next year to maybe reset your mind a little bit, or maybe a little bit more training to do, or maybe it was your nutrition, but you learned from it. And that's the whole key to life and going forward and accomplishing big things.
Exactly. And you know what else is interesting? On the things that you actually don't give up on, like how many, what you've learned about yourself after you didn't get up or give up, or what, how did your life end up, or what's happened to you since because you didn't give up, or, not even knowing what you would never have known, not just in a race, but like in business, early on. I mean, I've been in business for 21 years and, 9/11 almost shut me down. And then the airline, US Airways, who I used to be contracted with, went bankrupt twice. And, I was like, well, this is a hell of a business. And, I started thinking about looking to sell it. I was evaluating my business and I decided not to. And now, I never would have known what I would be missing had I sold it, so like if you also quit on a race or a mountain, you don't even know what you might be missing when you quit, you just don't know. So I find, for those times that you've had to dig so deep and you did finish and you didn't quit, you learned so much about yourself and you opened up so many doors that you wouldn't have even known about. So it's pretty neat.
I sit there having just gone through this exact thing, 3 months ago on Mount Everest. It would have been the easy choice was to quit, and the hard choice was to keep going. And yet, my life, as you had mentioned, there was a thin line between life and death at that point. Yet, I sit here today in my seat, the comforts of my house, having a podcast with you. And I'm so glad I didn't give up. I can't imagine, sitting here said, you know what, I had that much more stretch in me to get to the top and get back down. And I didn't utilize it. I didn't do enough work, right, to prepare for those things. And so I don't know. I mean, I agree with what you're saying. I'm glad you brought it up in that life is a box of chocolates. You're never going to figure out which one you got if you don't go and try these different things, that are out there. Right.
Totally. Yeah, exactly.
All right. Where can people find you? I know that you're very responsive on Facebook at least, but, I think just being, if nothing else, watching your travels and adventures and all those different things is just number one reason to track you, because it is inspiring, I think, to a lot of people, because a lot of people have a hard time getting off the couch, right? For whatever reason. And when you see somebody else doing it, you mentioned Dick Bass's book, from many years ago. That's just a book. That's not even physically him doing anything. Well, he did do something, but that book inspired, to do so much of what you do today. But where can people find you?
Well, I mean, mostly just on Facebook. I'm not on lots of the other platforms, but Facebook I post a lot, and I certainly like to share my races and adventures. And tons of people do like to come along for the ride. And I think it does motivate people because I'm as average physically as anybody else, nothing special. And it does show that, I'm not 20 years old anymore either. So I think people can get a lot from it knowing that anybody can go out and do this stuff. But yeah, basically you just follow me on Facebook, and I always answer. Anybody can send me a message and I always respond. I have a website that's woefully not updated. And I really did that just to chronicle my stuff for just so I can show my kids and grandkids one day that their grandpa wasn't old and fat and lazy at some point. But, I have a frankfumich.com list, like bunch of stuff I do and some of my causes and stuff too.
Yeah, I love that. And we will put that in the side notes. And I can tell you this on a closing note that just fact check that all my athletic skill has basically gone out the window. But we would be equals at this point in life. So
right.
That's the way that is. Okay, listen, buddy, I so appreciate you coming on, sharing your stories, sharing your life of adventure, and all these other things you have going on. Congratulations on your family, on your business, and it's been a joy and an honor to have you on finally face to face. So there he is, the one, the only Frank Fumich. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mark. Take care, buddy.
Hey, and thank you so much for listening to the Find Your Summit podcast. We are so glad to have you along for this journey. And if you enjoy the show, please tell a friend, share it on iTunes, spread it to the planet. We're looking to broadcast this to every person that is out there because, as you know, everybody has their own summit that they're going after. Okay, if you're looking to follow my journey, you can find that through my social links on markpattisonnfl.com. That's Mark, M-A-R-K, Pattison, P-A-T-T-I-S-O-N, NFL.com. So, until the next podcast, just remember, clear eyes, full hearts, and remember, it takes a little more to make a champion, so make it happen. Thank you. Bye.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.